Most people think attraction is about beauty, about charm, about saying the right things at the right time. They're wrong. Sexual tension isn't created through kindness or honesty or authentic connection. It is engineered through calculated emotional manipulation, through strategic withdrawal, through the deliberate creation of psychological imbalance. What you are about to learn isn't comfortable. It won't make you feel good about human nature, but it will make you understand the invisible architecture of desire, the mechanics most people never see, the game being played on them every single day. This isn't about love. This is about power. Let's begin. Law 1. The principle of manufactured scarcity. Human beings don't value what is readily available. They value what is difficult to obtain. This isn't opinion. It is evolutionary psychology hardwired into your limbic system. The moment you become too available, too predictable, too accessible, you lose value in the other person's psychological economy. Not because you've changed, but because scarcity drives desire more powerfully than any other factor. Here is what most people don't understand. Absence doesn't just make the heart grow fonder. It creates a void, and the human mind cannot tolerate voids. When you are constantly present, constantly responding, constantly available, you give the other person's brain nothing to chase, no gap to fill, no mystery to solve. The Machiavellian approach is simple. You engineer strategic absence. You respond, but never immediately. You are available, but never predictably. You create patterns, then deliberately break them. The other person's mind begins searching for explanations. Why didn't they respond? Are they losing interest? Did I do something wrong? This cognitive dissonance, this gap between expectation and reality, generates obsessive thinking. And obsessive thinking feels like attraction. But it is not. It is anxiety being misinterpreted as desire. The cruelty is intentional because without that slight edge of uncertainty, without that whisper of possible loss, sexual tension evaporates. Law 2. The mirror of selective validation. Every human being craves validation. This isn't weakness. This is neurological architecture. Your brain releases dopamine when you receive social approval. The Machiavellian understands this and weaponizes it. The technique is deceptively simple. You give validation unpredictably. Sometimes you are warm, engaged, enthusiastic about the other person. Sometimes you are distant, distracted, seemingly unimpressed. This creates what behavioral psychologists call an intermittent reinforcement schedule. The same mechanism that makes gambling addictive, the same mechanism that keeps people trapped in toxic relationships. When validation is constant, the brain adapts. The dopamine response diminishes. You become background noise. But when validation is unpredictable, when the other person never knows if they'll receive approval or indifference, their brain stays in a heightened state of alertness. Every interaction becomes a gamble. Will today be the day they're warm? Will this message get a response? Did that comment earn their smile? The person isn't falling for you. They're falling for the dopamine hit they get when your attention finally lands on them. Here is the manipulation. You make them feel like they have to earn your approval. Not because you are genuinely discerning, but because you've artificially restricted your positive reinforcement. They work harder. They invest more. They begin to believe that your rare moments of warmth are more valuable because they're so hard to obtain. You haven't become more attractive. You've simply hijacked their reward system. Law 3. The illusion of understanding people confuse sexual tension with emotional intimacy. They think tension comes from deep connection. It doesn't. It comes from the feeling of almost connecting but never quite arriving. The Machiavellian creates an illusion. You reveal enough to suggest depth. You share enough to create the impression of vulnerability, but you never fully open. You always hold something back. The technique works like this. In conversation, you drop fragments of your interior world, a childhood memory with just enough detail to feel authentic, a philosophical observation that suggests you think deeply, a moment of apparent vulnerability that makes them feel chosen, special, allowed into your inner circle. But then you close off. You change the subject. You deflect with humor. You create distance, just when they think they're getting close. This generates a specific psychological state. The other person begins to believe they understand you, that they've been given access to the real. But simultaneously, they sense there is more, layers they haven't reached, depths they haven't explored. This incomplete understanding, because humans are pattern recognition machines, we're compelled to complete incomplete patterns, to solve unsolved puzzles. The person doesn't realize they're being managed. They think they're discovering you, peeling back layers through their own perception and insight. But every layer was strategically placed, every revelation carefully calibrated. You are not being vulnerable. You are performing vulnerability at a frequency designed to keep them pursuing. Law 4, the architecture of jealousy. Jealousy is considered a negative emotion, toxic, something to avoid in healthy relationships. The Machiavellian sees it differently. Jealousy is a tool, a precise instrument for manufacturing desire. Human beings want what other people want. This is called social proof, and it operates at a level far below conscious awareness. When others desire someone, that person's perceived value increases automatically. Your brain interprets desire as evidence of worth. The technique is subtle but devastating. You don't create jealousy through obvious flirtation with others. That is amateur. That is crude. Instead, you allow the other person to glimpse your desirability through environmental evidence. A text from someone else that you are slow to hide. A story about someone who pursued you that you mention casually. The knowledge that you have options, presented not as a threat, but as simple reality. This triggers something primal. The fear of loss. The fear that someone else might claim what they want. Suddenly, you are not just someone they're interested in. You are someone they might lose. And the prospect of loss intensifies desire more powerfully than the prospect of gain ever could. This is called loss aversion. The person doesn't realize what is happening. They just know they feel more drawn to you, more urgent about securing your attention, more willing to compete. You've manufactured scarcity, not through your absence, but through the suggestion that others are recognizing your value. Law 5. The weapon of indifference. The person who cares less controls the relationship. This isn't romantic, it is mechanical. In any dynamic, the person with less emotional investment has more power. Because they can walk away. Because they're not operating from desperation or need. The Machiavellian understands this and cultivates strategic indifference, not genuine indifference. That would mean no engagement at all, but the appearance of indifference. The posture of someone for whom this interaction is interesting but not necessary. This is difficult for most people, because when they're attracted to someone, they show it. They invest, they pursue, they make their interest clear, and in doing so, they hand over their power. The technique requires discipline. You engage, but never chase. You respond, but never immediately. You are interested, but never desperate. Even when you want to reach out, you wait. Even when you want to explain yourself, you remain silent. Even when you feel the pull to reassure them, you let them sit with uncertainty. This creates an imbalance. The other person begins to invest more energy, more thought, more effort. They're trying to close the distance you've created. They're trying to generate in you the same level of interest they feel. But every attempt to close that gap only widens the power differential. because their investment is visible and yours remains ambiguous. People mistake this for confidence. They think you are so self-assured, so certain of your value, that you don't need to chase. They're not wrong. But it is not natural confidence. It is performed detachment, calculated to make them work harder for your attention. Law 6, the tempo of acceleration and retreats. Sexual tension requires rhythm, patterns that establish comfort, then disruption that creates excitement. Most people operate at a constant tempo. They're consistently available, consistently responsive, consistently themselves. This creates predictability, and predictability is the death of tension. The Machiavellian operates in cycles. There are periods of intense engagement, deep connection, sustained attention. These periods create investment. The other person begins to expect this level of engagement. They adapt to it. They begin to build a relationship in their mind based on this tempo. Then you retreat. Not permanently, not with explanation. You simply reduce your presence. Shorter responses, longer gaps. Less availability. This disruption creates panic in the other person's nervous system. What changed? What did I do? Are they losing interest? Their mind races to find explanations, to restore the previous equilibrium. And in that racing, in that searching, sexual tension intensifies because they're now chasing something that was there and disappeared. Something they had and lost. Then, just as they're beginning to withdraw themselves, you return. You re-engage at the previous intensity. The relief they feel, the return of your attention, floods their system with dopamine and oxytocin. They feel like they've won something back, like they've successfully recaptured your interest. But you never lost interest. You just manipulated the tempo to keep them psychologically off balance. The cruelty isn't in the retreat. It is in the deliberate creation of anxiety, followed by relief, over and over, until they become conditioned to the cycle. Law 7. The power of unspoken desire. Sexual tension lives in what is unsaid, in implication rather than declaration. The moment desire becomes explicit, the tension begins to dissipate, because explicit desire removes ambiguity, and ambiguity is the oxygen that feeds tension. The Machiavellian never makes their desire fully explicit. They imply, they suggest, they create moments, charged with possibility, but never cross the line into direct statement. This operates through subtle communication, eye contact held slightly too long, physical proximity that suggests intentionality, comments that could be interpreted as flirtation or friendship depending on the other person's perception. The genius is in the deniability. You've created a situation where the other person feels desire, but can't be certain it is reciprocated, where they're reading signals but can't be sure they're interpreting them correctly. This uncertainty keeps their mind engaged. They're constantly analyzing your behavior, searching for confirmation, trying to decode meaning from ambiguous signals. And in that searching, they become obsessed. Not with you necessarily, but with the question of whether you want them. Here is the manipulation. By refusing to make your desire explicit, you force them to make the first move, to take the risk, to expose themselves. And whoever exposes themselves first loses power in the dynamic, because they've revealed their position, while yours remains strategically ambiguous. Law 8. The cultivation of mystique. Familiarity breeds contempt, or at minimum, it breeds comfort. And comfort is incompatible with sexual tension. Tension requires distance, unknown variables. Mystery. The Machiavellian guards their inner world, not because they're genuinely private. Their thoughts, their feelings, their daily activities, their past, their dreams. They think transparency builds connection. It does, but it kills tension. Because once someone fully knows you, there is nothing left to discover. The technique is simple but requires discipline. You share selectively. You reveal the surface but protect the core. You answer questions but never completely. The other person gets pieces of you, fragments that feel real and authentic, but never the whole picture. This creates an itch they can't scratch, a desire to know more that can never be fully satisfied. Because for every question you answer, new ones emerge. For every layer you reveal, they sense deeper layers beneath. People often mistake this for depth. They think you are complex, nuanced, difficult to understand. And perhaps you are. But the mystique isn't accidental. It is constructed. You are not hiding because you have something to hide. You are hiding because being partially known is more powerful than being fully understood. Law 9. The deployment of push-pull dynamics. Sexual tension exists in the space between wanting someone and pushing them away. The Machiavellian doesn't pursue in a straight line. They create a push-pull dynamic. Moments of intense closeness followed by deliberate distance. Warmth followed by coldness. Inclusion followed by exclusion. This operates on a neurological level. When you pull someone close emotionally, psychologically, sometimes physically, you activate their attachment system. They begin to feel safe, connected, bonded. Then you push, not dramatically, not with cruelty, just a subtle withdrawal of the warmth they were receiving. This activates their anxiety, their fear of abandonment, their need to restore the connection. The push makes the next pull more powerful, because they're now relieved to have your attention back, grateful for your warmth, more invested in maintaining it. The pattern repeats. Pull them in, push them away. Pull them in, push them away. Push them away. Each cycle increases their emotional investment. Each cycle makes them work harder to stay in your orbit. This isn't about playing games for entertainment. It is about understanding that human attachment doesn't form through constant positive reinforcement. It forms through the oscillation between connection and disconnection, through the fear of loss and the relief of return. You are not creating love. You are creating dependency, disguised as desire. Law 10. The authority of selective attention. Attention is currency. In an age of constant distraction, sustained attention from another person has become rare valuable. The Machiavellian understands this and weaponizes their attention. The technique operates in two phases. First, you give complete, undivided attention. When you are with the other person physically or digitally, you are fully present. No distractions, no divided focus. You make them feel like the only person in the world. This creates a powerful imprint, because most people never receive this level of attention. Their interactions with others are fragmented, partial. Your complete presence feels extraordinary. It feels like being seen in a way they're rarely seen. Then strategically, you withdraw that attention, not by being distracted when you are with them, but by making yourself less available, by having other priorities, by having a life that doesn't revolve around them. The contrast is devastating. They've experienced what your full attention feels like, and now they want it back. They crave it. They'll work to earn it. The manipulation is subtle. You are not being inconsistent in your attention when you are present. You are being inconsistent in your availability. And that inconsistency, the memory of your complete focus combined with its current absence, creates obsessive thinking. They don't realize you are managing your availability deliberately. They think you are just busy, just living your life. But every moment of your attention has been strategically deployed to maximize its perceived value. Law 11. The seduction of intellectual challenge. Most people try to build attraction through agreement, through finding common ground, through validation of the other person's opinions and worldview. This creates comfort, not tension. The Machiavellian uses disagreement as a tool, Not aggressive confrontation, but intellectual challenge, the presentation of alternative perspectives, the gentle dismantling of assumptions. This operates on multiple levels. First, it positions you as an intellectual equal or superior, someone who can engage with ideas at depth, someone who doesn't need to agree to be agreeable. Second, it creates friction, and friction generates heat. When someone challenges your thinking, you become more engaged, more alert, more invested in defending your position or reconsidering it. The conversation moves from pleasant exchange to intellectual sparring, and sparring creates intensity. Third, it prevents you from becoming an emotional mirror. Most people, when attracted to someone, reflect that person's opinions back to them. They agree, they validate, they create a false sense of complete compatibility. The Machiavellian refuses to be a mirror. They remain separate, distinct, someone who thinks independently and isn't afraid to disagree. This creates respect. And respect, combined with attraction, generates sexual tension far more effectively than validation alone. The technique requires calibration. You challenge, but not on deeply held emotional beliefs. You disagree, but with intellectual arguments, not personal attacks. You create friction, but not actual conflict. The other person should leave conversations slightly unsettled, slightly challenged, thinking about what you said, preparing counter-arguments for next time. You've occupied mental space, not through agreement, through productive opposition. Law 12. The framework of plausible deniability. Every action you take must have dual interpretation. This is critical, because the moment your intentions become completely transparent, you lose strategic advantage. The Machiavellian operates in the space of plausible deniability. Every gesture can be interpreted as either romantic interest or friendly behavior. Every comment has multiple possible meanings. Every action has an innocent explanation. This serves two functions. First, it allows you to escalate without risk. If the other person doesn't respond to a gesture that could be interpreted romantically, you can retreat to the innocent interpretation. No harm, no rejection, no loss of face. Second, it forces the other person to make interpretive decisions. They have to decide what you meant, what you intended, whether that touch was accidental or deliberate, whether that comment was flirtation or friendship. And in making those interpretations, they reveal their own desires, because people interpret ambiguous signals through the lens of their own feelings. If they want you to be flirting, they'll interpret ambiguous behavior as flirtatious. If they're uncertain, they'll remain in that uncertainty. Either way, you've created engagement. You've made them think about you, analyze your behavior, try to decode your intentions. The manipulation is elegant. You've created a situation where they can't confront you directly about your intentions, because you can always claim the innocent interpretation. You've maintained complete deniability while simultaneously testing their interest and occupying their mental space. Law 13. The end game of strategic surrender. All of this, every law, every technique, every manipulation, has one fatal flaw. It must eventually end. The Machiavellian knows that sexual tension cannot be sustained indefinitely. It peaks, and then it must either be released or it dissipates entirely. The question is when and how. The amateur sustains tension too long. They become addicted to the power dynamic. They keep playing the game until the other person withdraws entirely, exhausted by the constant push-pull. The skilled Machiavellian knows when to surrender control, when to allow the tension to resolve. But even in surrender, there is strategy. You don't surrender. because the other person has won. You surrender when it serves your purposes. When the timing is right, when maximum investment has been achieved. The technique is counterintuitive. After all the withdrawal, all the ambiguity, all the calculated distance, you allow yourself to be caught. You let them see behind the performance. You create a moment of apparent vulnerability where they believe they've finally broken through your defenses, that they've earned access to the real you. But even this is calibrated. Because the person who believes they've conquered you will guard that conquest jealously. They'll protect the relationship they worked so hard to create. They'll invest in maintaining what they struggled to win. The manipulation doesn't end with physical intimacy. It transitions from the creation of tension to the management of attachment. The game continues, just in a different form. These aren't tools for building healthy relationships. They're tools for creating power dynamics, disguised as attraction, for manufacturing desire through psychological manipulation, for engineering dependency and calling it chemistry. You can use them. Many do. They work. They work because they exploit fundamental features of human psychology, or need for validation, or fear of loss, or attraction to mystery, our vulnerability to intermittent reinforcement. But understand what you are doing. You are not creating genuine connection. You are creating a carefully constructed illusion, one that requires constant maintenance, constant performance, constant management. The person attracted to you isn't attracted to who you actually are. They're attracted to the performance you've created, the role you've played, the pattern you've engineered. And perhaps that is enough for you. Perhaps power is more valuable than authenticity. Perhaps control is more satisfying than mutual vulnerability. That is your decision to make, but make it consciously. Understand the cost of never being known, the cost of constant performance, the cost of relationships built on strategic manipulation rather than genuine compatibility. These Machiavellian laws work, but they demand a price. The question is whether you are willing to pay it.